It's the Growing for Market podcast.
I heard that the rumor that might have been a double hybrid, a hybrid of two hybrids. They have to maintain 4 inbred lines to create that hybrid at any time, which is kind of complicated and interesting. But so because of that complicated genetics, there's certain traits and certain flavors that are really hard to all have in the same seed. And that was one of their ways of making that happen. So and when you have something like that, if you try to dehybridize it, you get some very interesting things that are not at all like the variety. And you get lots of segregating traits and unexpected things that can lead to special new varieties that are nothing like the original, but are also cool in their own way.
Hello, and welcome to the Growing for Market podcast, where we talk about growing, marketing, and the business of growing vegetables and flowers for local markets like farmers markets, CSAs, farm stands, and local wholesaling. I'm Andrew Mefferd, your host and the editor of Growing for Market magazine for 34 years, the magazine for flower and vegetable market farmers. If you're enjoying the podcast, just wait till you see the magazine. Go to growingformarket.com for more. Also, if you could give us a follow and a rating, it really helps other like-minded people find the podcast. And now, let's take a minute to hear from our sponsors. It's with their generous support that we can bring you the podcast for free. This episode is brought to you by Tend, the all-in-one AI-powered farm management platform trusted by modern growers. Whether you're growing vegetables, flowers, or fruit, or managing a nursery, greenhouse, or vineyard, you know how much time gets lost in planning, tracking, and staying organized. Tend helps you cut through the busy work so you can focus on growing and selling what matters. With Tend, you can plan your crops, assign and track tasks, manage inventory, and handle your sales and accounting all in one smart, easy-to-use platform. Whether you run a 1-acre farm or manage a large operation, Tend adapts to your scale and style, supporting everything from manual labor to fully mechanized workflows. Try it for free at tend.com. No credit card required. That's TEND.com. Streamline your season and grow with confidence. So you got your soil tested, or you need your soil tested. It's time to contact Ohio Earth Food. Since 1972, they have been growers' trusted source for organic soil amendments to apply before you plant to prevent those deficiency symptoms that limit production. Their knowledgeable staff have all been a part of certified organic operations and can help you choose the best products for your soil and deliver or ship them right to your farm. With locations in Northwest Ohio and just north of Madison, Wisconsin, Ohio Earth Food wants to be your partner for organic inputs. Don't count on luck this year. Start your seeds in the Seed Catapult potting soil and put their Revita fertilizers in your beds, and rest assured that your plants will have all the nutrients, stimulants, and energy for whatever comes their way. Feed your soil and let your soil feed the plants. Visit them at ohioearthfood.com. Today, we have the pleasure of welcoming Andrew Still to the Growing for Market podcast. Andrew is one of the founders of Adaptive Seeds, a farm-based seed company in Sweet Home, Oregon, that is working to develop varieties that are suited to the conditions of the Pacific Northwest region of the United States and Canada, and also working to preserve the biodiversity in our vegetable and flower varieties. So, without further ado, welcome to the Growing for Market podcast, Andrew.
It's really good to be here. I'm excited to help people get excited about biodiverse seeds and all the nerdy fun things that we could talk about today.
Yeah, I'll bet. Yes, and such a good time to talk about seeds. Our audience is probably looking at their seed catalogs right now. I'm looking forward to this interview because I had the pleasure of visiting your farm. I think must have been about a decade ago or so, because I remember I was very new at Growing for Market, and it was really fun for me to visit the farm where you produce a lot of the seeds. And I get the impression that you guys have grown and changed a lot over the years. So I've enjoyed seeing that from afar, but it'd be even more fun for me to check in and see what's changed over the years. So first of all, how long has Adaptive Seeds been around, and why did you decide to start a seed company in the first place?
Well, Adaptive Seeds started back in 2009, 2010, I think was our first seed catalog. And and you were around a little bit after that. And so it's funny to me thinking about how you were new. At the time, we felt very new in the seed business at the time. So very bright-eyed and less jaded, I guess, as far as like how much work it has become. It's always going to be awesome and easy, but no, that was a while back. We started Adaptive Seeds out of a project that we had called the Seed Ambassadors Project, which we traveled all over Europe and Southeast Asia and other places to like collect seed and talk to seed savers and seed stewards and seed companies and make connections and friends over the course of our unemployment that we had during the winter time. So that was kind of the project that we started because we wanted to get more into seeds and meet people and do something more than just go on a vacation. And that was because we were farm laborers and like apprentices on farms, farm staff over a decade or more of like working on various other farms in Oregon. So we took our savings and our seasonal unemployment and did that. And that led to a lot of collecting lots of seeds, learning a lot about seeds, and it kind of snowballed slowly into Adaptive Seeds. And that was real fun because those kinds of projects that you start, sometimes they influence the direction that you go for a large portion of the rest of your life. So it seemed kind of like silly and fun at the time, and it turned into our lives in the end. So that's how that worked out.
Okay. That's right. Yeah, I remember that you took this trip and visited the seed people in Europe. Did you get varieties on that trip that are now incorporated into Adaptive Seeds, varieties that you're selling?
So when we traveled through Europe as the Seed Ambassadors Project, Sarah and I and a few friends along the way, we collected over 800 varieties of open pollinated seed crops of vegetables and flowers and herbs, and we brought them back to the United States and trialed them on our farm. Actually, it wasn't our farm at the time. It was someone else's farm, Hayhurst Farm in Yoncalla, Oregon, where we were employees and so we grew our first seed crops as like a weekend project, and we trialed everything we had. We sourced hundreds of other varieties to trial to see what we liked and see what we wanted to save seed on. And we learned a lot about the plants by just planting them and observing them. And many of them did really well in Oregon, and some of them did very poorly. And that was something that humbled us and taught us a lot about how important trials are. And throughout that process, we collected enough that we thought was really, really great, that we really wanted to share with other people. And before Adaptive Seeds, we started a listing in the Seed Savers Exchange yearbook. So we distributed seeds that way for a while, just as like a volunteer project. And after working for other farms for years, we decided we needed to start our own business and pay for the seeds as opposed to having the seeds just cost us. And eventually we got lucky and moved onto a farm in Lynn County, Oregon, north of Eugene. And we've been here ever since. That is when we met you. We were here on this farm near Crawfordsville, Oregon. And we just planted seeds and saved seeds, but we didn't start the farm and just do Adaptive Seeds. We started the farm as a vegetable seed producer and a vegetable crop producer. So it was a mixed vegetable production farm. We did some beans and grains to see if we could diversify our market booth. And that actually lasted for many years as a vegetable producer. And the seeds didn't really become a big enough enterprise until maybe 3 or 4 years after that, where we started focusing only on seeds. So our background as vegetable producers kind of informed our aesthetic and our desires for what seeds we wanted to grow, but it didn't turn into 100% seeds until a bit later, because seed enterprises take a while to build. They're hard to just start up and be successful immediately.
Yeah, seeds are playing the long game.
Yeah, for sure.
Are you all seed production now, or do you still do any fresh market stuff?
We are all seed production now. Occasionally we'll have like a bumper crop of like winter squash or garlic or something like that, and we'll sell some wholesale, but it's never an intended purposeful enterprise. We're completely focused on the seeds.
Yeah. Well, I can see how, I mean, seeds are there's a lot that goes along with seed production. So I can see how that would probably be nice, I would think, to just consolidate, like be able to focus completely on seed production and not too much on.
Yeah. Sometimes I wonder about like when we're harvesting watermelon seeds that like we probably could wholesale these watermelons whole as watermelons and make more money than the seeds. But we don't do that. We're very seed focused.
Yeah. Well, you need to start a line of watermelon water or something, right? So you can I know you need a project, so you could find something that like sluices the seed off to one side and then all the juice, it's just like, how people love the coconut water, be like the adaptive watermelon water.
Yeah, that'd be good. Or like we could vac pack watermelon hearts, just the really delicious inner core that doesn't have any seeds. A new gourmet product.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I imagine that most, market farmers would probably see a lot that's familiar on your farm. Well, I mean, I know because I've been there, but also, I imagine your farm is a lot like most market farms, but more dehydrators and cold storage, maybe? Like, is that accurate? Like, would a market farmer come into your farm be like, oh yeah, I get this? Or would they see a lot of like specialized equipment that they don't recognize?
Well, there's not too much specialized equipment. We do have seed cleaning. Like we have winnow wizards, which do a lot of the seed cleaning. We have a lot of screens. We don't have a walk-in cooler, so that's something that would be missing to a typical vegetable grower. We have like the same tractors, a cultivating tractor. The fields are oriented in rows, similarly to a vegetable farm, but the process throughout the year is very different. And then we also have the seed selling business part is in a building across the road. That is where the seed is stored and the packing happens and the shipping. So that's all different over there. But the home farm site is very reminiscent of a vegetable production farm, but the process throughout the year can be quite different than a typical vegetable producer.
Okay, because you're like doing all this tending and selection, I imagine, through the season without the like weekly harvest, and then you guys are probably really busy in the fall, I'm guessing, just harvesting and drying and all this stuff.
It comes in like these big waves of work. So like in the spring, we have a pretty short season here and it's really wet into the spring. So once it dries out and we can get out and do our cultivation and get beds ready, it's tractoring and weeding and just work until it's all done and all the fields are ready. And then we plant everything, transplant or direct sow everything throughout the course of a few weeks. And then it's watering and weeding constantly for a month and then to start harvesting. So it's like there's very little like we do this on Wednesday, we do this on Tuesday, we do this on it's like very much you get really tired of tractoring, you get really tired of weeding because it's all you're doing for a while. And then near the end of the season you're harvesting, and then you're cleaning, drying, cleaning. And then right now it's packing seeds for getting ready for the new year. So right when you get bored of it changes, but it's a lot of the same thing for chunks of time, as opposed to a very mixed operation where you have to like juggle everything and juggle markets every week. We don't have to do that. But so it's a different mindset that took us a little bit to get used to, but I kind of like it. It works.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, that's the kind of what I was thinking. I was thinking that most market farmers would probably see a lot of similarities, but some differences.
It's funny because like right when you are like cleaning something for the last time you cleaned it was a year ago, and you're like, how did I do this last year? And then you start remembering these things from 12 months ago. And yeah, so it's important for us to like write down our processes and develop like SOPs for things because you don't do it every week, so you tend to forget a lot of the details.
Yeah, some once a year stuff. All right, that makes sense. I know one of your goals is to breed varieties that are well suited to your region. So can you tell us what type of traits you want to encourage that will help varieties do well in the Pacific Northwest?
Well, fundamentally, the most important thing for us is, does it make seed in our climate? And there's a lot of varieties that grow really well here that don't produce seed here or are challenging in certain ways that we don't grow because of that. So is it suitable not only for vegetable production or flower production or whatever the goal is, but also is it suitable for the seed crop as well? And I think we do a little bit of selection work and breeding work for quality of the produce that you would be harvesting, but we also try to make sure that there's not detrimental traits that make it hard to save the seed. So for example, there's a lot of lettuces that do really well, but some of them are really late to bolt or are prone to certain diseases only when they're flowering, but are fine when they're heading. So there's interesting dynamics there. So you have to select for produce suitability and also seed production suitability. That's kind of the basics of where we start. And we do a lot of trialing to see what is already good that might work here, because there's a lot of things that no one has ever tried to grow here that we don't actually know if it's going to work here or not. So that's part of the fun.
Okay. Can you give me an example? Is there anything that you weren't sure if it would work out and it ended up working out?
Well, one of the hardest things for us to figure out was okra, because okra is likes the heat, it likes the humidity, and we only get a couple weeks of temperatures in the 90s. And maybe our typical 70s and 80s through the summer. So it's warm, but it's not hot for okra. And we've had to really trial a bunch of varieties and find specific varieties that do well in a drier, not quite as warm area. But that's something that you could plant most okra here and get a small harvest maybe, but getting good seed crops here would be really hard, because it starts to ripen and dry down the seed in September and October when the rain is starting and the cold weather's starting again. So sometimes we have to race the weather in order to get stuff in as a seed crop. It's always surprising though. I always have assumptions about things that are oh, this probably won't work here. And then you try it and sometimes you're very correct, but other times you're wrong and you could be surprised in a good way. There's a lot of Thai varieties that some of them don't grow here at all because they really, really want the tropical environment. But then some of them are really good at growing here. There's a few peppers and some eggplants that just seem to like it here because they were selected for a short season in Thailand, but the short season in Thailand is completely different than our short season. But for some reason, it just worked out perfectly fine. So yeah. It's interesting, and it's always humbling. The plants, when you think you have heuristics and guidelines of what to expect, the plants are eager to prove you wrong.
Yes. Yeah. Trialing is always interesting. And now let's take a minute to hear from our sponsors. It's with their generous support that we can bring you the podcast for free.
Are you ready to make 2026 your most productive growing season yet? Hi, I'm Emily from Tillmore, and we're here to help you get there.
And I'm Aaron. At Tillmore, we offer practical tools for every scale. Planting to cultivation, soil amendments, harvest tools, and now even bird control. We can be your one-stop shop for all your vegetable and flower growing solutions.
And if you're not sure what's right for your farm, we offer free consultations to help dial in weed control and overall workflow.
One unit growers are especially excited about is the Super E, our electric cultivating tractor. It's quiet, powerful, and makes precision weeding a whole lot easier.
We're also proud to bring TerraTech's full catalog of high-quality tools to growers across the U.S.
At the end of the day, we care about helping farmers succeed and stay profitable heading into the new year.
Learn more and book your free consultation at tillmore.com.
Hey, it's Lindsay from Grown By. There are a lot of farm sales platforms out there, but there's only one that's cooperatively owned by farmers. And that's Grown By, your all-in-one solution to simplify farm sales. I'm proud and excited to share 2 new features now available on top of the tools you already know and love. Number 1, our customizable CSA box builder. It allows your customers to simply say what they'd like in their share, and Grown By matches their preferences with your weekly harvest. Number 2, our new wholesale-only marketplace. Developed with the Culinary Institute of America, it makes your life easier with a dedicated shop for your wholesale customers. No more texting those chefs. Combining retail and wholesale inventories and records. And, drumroll, automatic payments on due dates. No more chasing down late payments. These new features sit alongside our popular online sales and traditional subscription CSA tools, making it easier than ever to manage your farm's business. As you start to get ready for next season, we'd love to hear from you and see if our cooperative can be a partner in growing your farm. Visit us at grownby.com. That's GROWNBY.com.
And now, back to the show. So did you find an okra that you liked?
Yeah, we found two. We found one called Burmese okra. I think it might have been a seed produced by Edmund, previous podcast guest, and it happened to be a Southeast Asian variety that grows a pretty small, short plant and produces early, and it produces a lot early in like a smaller plant as opposed to big giant forest of okra that produces pods over months. And it just seemed to do really well for us. That was one of those examples of like something about the selection of okra in Southeast Asia made it also work well in the Pacific Northwest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that's so cool because you wouldn't know that other than trying. So
yeah, it's still a marginal crop. I don't want people to think that, oh yeah, we can grow okra super easy now. It's not that easy. And also, like, we pick the pods when they're really, really small because if you let them get slightly too big, they get woody immediately. Because it's still challenging, but we like to push the boundaries of what's possible.
Yeah. Well, smaller the better anyway. Yeah. It don't, like you said, it only goes downhill when it gets really big. Well, I will try your okras this year because a lot of people probably know I'm up here in Maine. So similarly short season area, but a little different weather than the northwest corner of the country. But like one thing we do have in common is short seasons. And probably about a year ago, I think it's Chris Smith with the Utopian Seed Project on.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And he's really into okra. So like he wrote a book about okra. So, so I'm originally from Virginia and I can't we didn't eat a ton of okra growing up, but like a lot of my family's roots are in that middle Atlantic area. And it was like eaten. So this past year, I actually forget which variety of okra we tried, and it did not do great. I think I started a little late. What I did was I found the earliest okra that I could find, but I think I didn't plant it early enough, or whatever the case is, it didn't work out. It was not well adapted to Maine, let me say that. So I'll give your okra a shot because talking with Chris got me jazzed about okra again.
Yeah, and Chris, they have some interesting, what we probably will talk a little bit more about later, about the diverse gene pool mix of various okras crossed together in a big population. That's something that I was looking into maybe planting and seeing if there's any stuff in there that might do well here. I imagine that more than half of it would probably struggle and give up, but some of it in there would probably be really cool. I really like that project for just like convincing people to just try okra and see what you get. I kind of was inspired by that a little bit. This last year, we sourced, I think it was 8 varieties of sesame. And sesame is a crop that's really hard for us to produce here because it ripens really late in the season, right when it starts to rain. And you don't want your sesame to get rained on in Oregon. But we trialed a bunch and found many varieties that did well. And instead of specifically going for 1 or 2 varieties, we let them all flower together and we harvested them together. And we found some Soviet varieties of sesame and some Afghan varieties and a selection from Peace Seedlings and Corvallis called Shades of Sesame that they had been selecting a while locally. So we're going to create a giant gene pool mix of sesames that includes some of the various ones that did well for us. So maybe it'll do well for other people too. So that's exciting. That's another example of a crop that's super marginal. Most of our catalog is stuff that's easy to grow because we don't like getting emails of people being like, this sucks, it didn't grow for me. But we also like to push the boundaries as well.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I feel like you got to have some staples, but having some non-staples just makes the catalog a lot more interesting.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. We like to say that people come for the diversity, but buy most of the classics because it's what they'll try a few cool weird things, but most people want stuff that works well and grows well and tastes good.
Yeah, well, I guess that's where they're staples. Like,
Makes
yes,
perfect
a
sense.
lot more market farms are supported on tomatoes than sesame, but like if you can have something interesting like that, you're probably I don't know, sesame is the best example, but you know what I mean. Like if you can have something that everybody else doesn't have, it makes your setup a lot more interesting. So, are there specific pests and diseases that you're breeding for, trying to get resistance to for your region?
There's some things that haunt us that are challenging for us. We're not as specific about a particularly bad disease as certain places, like in the southeast, like Edmund talking about the mildews down there that are problems with cucurbits. We have a very dry summer and a very kind of warm, dry West Coast Mediterranean climate in the summertime. So that is actually really helpful for us for seed production, and we can grow a lot of things here that other people can't grow because it's kind of the perfect climate for that. So we don't have as many diseases. In the wintertime, it can be different with the wet, cold, and brassica diseases, but those things can be kind of mitigated with like practice, like how you grow the crop, airflow, like things like that. So we tend to have some diseases all the time, but nothing that's super critical that like really makes it a deal breaker. So that gives us an opportunity to select for things that do better, just like with mass selection of like, oh, this variety seems to do better. And if I take stock seed from it, the plants that are healthier, it might contribute some bit of resistance to diseases. But we don't do specific breeding projects where we try to cross in something that's disease resistant in order to impart a particular trait that can fight a specific thing. Partly because we don't have a lot of time to do that with running the business and the seed production, but also because we haven't had a huge need to or ability to, because we don't have crazy hard diseases that we need to select for. One disease that is always a problem for us that we've been trying to select for a little bit, or find germplasm or varieties that do better than some of our other stuff, is bean common mosaic virus. It's a kind of a classic virus that gets passed by aphids from plant to plant that can kind of disorder the plant leaves, and you get a drop in yield. Sometimes you get lower quality bean seeds or it just makes the plants sad and they don't produce as well and don't taste as good. But so we've been trying to find some cool stuff that is resistant to that. And this last year we trialed did an increase on a UC tiger's eye bean, which was selected by University of California, Davis to be resistant to the bean common mosaic virus. And we grew it next to our old tiger's eye variety, the one that is susceptible to that virus. And it was really, really insightful and interesting to us because they ended up yielding the same, but they had problems for different reasons. Like the UC material was very resistant to the bean common mosaic virus. And our old tiger's eye was super virused, and like the leaves were kind of curled and yellow, but it still produced a ton of beans. Like it was like, oh, I'm sick, but I don't care. It was kind of
Gotta
funny.
Reproduce.
Yeah, and like some stuff just doesn't, you can't continue it. It just can't handle the pressure, but some beans they've learned to deal with it in an interesting way. But the funny thing about the UC tiger's eye, it has this eye gene resistance to the mosaic virus, and it's perfectly good at resisting it. Like the aphids will bite a leaf, and when they transfer that virus into the leaf, the little tiny area around the leaf will die. So there's this little tiny spot of dead tissue, and it prevents the virus from replicating, which is kind of fascinating. Wow. And so it's like it's perfectly good at fighting this virus. It just won't let the virus replicate inside the bean. But the problem that we found was that there's other viruses that our old beans have that don't bother the old beans. But when the bean common mosaic necrosis virus, which is different, gets into the UC tiger's eye the same way, instead of just a little tiny bit of tissue that dies, the whole plant dies. So we're getting this random plants throughout the field that were just dead, and they're almost done. And we're like, what is going on? That was a kind of a learning experience about how like we were selecting and trying to find material that was resistant, but it ended up being like we want to now try to breed another version 3 of Tiger's Eye bean, having seen that, because it's so good in other ways. The UC material is excellent, but because we grew it next to our old beans, it didn't work. So I thought that was an interesting thing, that you never know what you're going to get when you start selecting for disease resistances and do plant breeding projects. And that was a surprising thing for us and taught us a lot about beans.
So would you cross your Tiger's Eye selection with the UC Tiger's Eye and get the third version that has the resistance from the UC version, but also like the broad resistance that you're talking about from your old selection, or?
Probably not back to the UC, or the UC. We wouldn't breed with the old Tiger's Eye because it tolerates that virus, but if that virus gets into the new material with the I gene, it dies. So what we need to do is find a specific resistance gene to the new necrosis virus that we need to add to the UC Tiger's Eye, which there are varieties out there that have this. So there's I think, I don't know if it's Quincy Pinto is a good Pinto variety that has it. We might cross something like that into it just to and then back cross to the Tiger's Eye to preserve the colors and the flavors and stuff like that. So we might do something like that. That's something that I'm looking forward to trying.
Then you have to hope for a really bad virus year so that you get a lot of virus pressure and see who tolerates it the best, right?
Aphids, where are you, aphids? Where are you, leafhoppers?
You can probably go see your farmer friends and vacuum up some aphids and bring them over to your farm.
Yeah, I guess my takeaway from that whole selecting and breeding for disease resistance for us is that a lot of the times we have a problem, it's not a huge problem. It's just, it would be better if we didn't have this problem, but it still makes a perfectly satisfactory seed crop, and you could grow it and produce enough seed that it would be a perfectly satisfying enterprise as a crop. But we're always looking to improve things. And so we're not trying to be perfect, because we're working with so much diversity and so much chaos in our ecosystem. But it's something that we're always looking for opportunities, but also learning to live with a lot of things as well, as long as it's not too bad of a problem.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense. I mean, and that's part of developing crops that are adapted to your region, right? Because it's, there's certain things the Mid-Atlantic or, different regions might be really big problems that are just more of a nuisance where you are, and vice versa. So, all right, that makes sense. What about flavor and productivity? I'm just curious how you improve those in a crop. But I'm thinking, I assume you're tasting everything and taking yield data, but is there anything more? I could be wrong about that. So I'm just curious, because I know even with, something that came up once again in our interview with Edmund is that even if you're happy with an open pollinated variety, if you don't keep selecting it or roguing it, those might not be the wrong terms, but tell me even if you're happy with a variety, there's still maintenance required to keep that variety good. And you'll see that sometimes, right? Some companies will just do big productions and won't really rogue them, or it's easy. I feel like that's may have contributed to some open pollinated varieties that have been popular in the past, maybe becoming less popular because there were some people who were just doing big productions and not really roguing and maintaining that variety. So I guess you can answer that however you want, but I was just curious. I'm just trying to give people an insight into how their varieties are bred.
Yeah, I think if you start with surveying what's out there, that's the most powerful tool that I've found for breeding for productivity or flavor, or finding something that's productive and flavorful so you don't have to do a breeding project is always the best case scenario, because there's only so many hours in the day. Yeah, there's a lot of variability out there between varieties and how they respond to your farm and your production practices and your region and environment. But also there's just some cool stuff out there that just got dropped from the seed industry because they're on to the next thing, or it isn't the new hip thing anymore, but it's still amazing if you go back to it 10 years later.
Yeah. Well, it happens all the time, right? People's favorite varieties just go away.
Exactly.
Which is annoying. Yeah.
And so there's always the tension between productivity and flavor, or productivity and a particular trait that you're looking for as far as like texture, tenderness, or beautiful color. Like you can't have everything all the time necessarily, so it's challenging when selecting for breeding. So we always like to make sure that things are productive enough to make it a viable crop. Ideally, it would be more productive than the average, but maybe not the peak perfect yield, because you'd be sacrificing other things if you target that. Or like the best quality shipping cabbage is not going to probably taste very good as far as flavor and texture. So there's antagonistic things that you can select for. Another story about beans, but this time bush green beans. I was like, I want to get to know our varieties better. Sarah wanted to taste them all and compare them all. And because of that, I went and found 30 varieties in addition to ours that were bush green beans, not filet beans, but like classic bush green beans. So they're all comparable to each other. And I found 30 varieties that were commercially available, not proprietary, so they didn't have patents or PVPs or licenses associated with them. And I sourced them all, and we planted them all out on a bed, a 200-foot bed, and compared them all this summer. And I planted them in order of the year that they were released by the plant breeders. So you kind of like see like the old-fashioned like ones from like 1900 were kind of wonky and funky and flopped on the ground and weren't up to standard like agricultural demands. But then there's the most new ones were these little tiny plants that were designed for a single machine harvest, that tended to like not, some of them tasted good, but a lot of them tasted kind of waxy and tough and weren't particularly delicious, but had very high qualities in some other aspects. So it's fun to see the evolution of the green bean over like since 1900 to now. And we found some really good stuff in there. And a lot of the things that I liked were varieties from the 90s that were dropped from seed catalogs in like the early 2000s. So it's always surprising when you plant a bunch of things to see what you get. And my favorite bean out of that whole thing was an old variety called Grenoble, that what used to be in the Johnny's catalog, that I think it was Royal Sleus Seminis, maybe Pedo Seed helped breed that one. And it got dropped. And I think it was because it didn't have as concentrated of a seed of a harvest. So you could come back to it 3 times and do 3 harvests from a single planting. But I liked it because it's just delicious. It just tastes so good. And the right texture, really good, like sweet bean flavor. And it got dropped and it was gone for a long time. We actually found that Dan Brisebois was growing it at Tournesol, and he sent us some seed, and it's taken us like 8 years to get it into the catalog, but I'm excited to add that to the catalog this next year as like I didn't have to do any breeding because this bean already exists, and it tastes really good and it's productive. As long as you're happy doing 2 or 3 harvests, it's very productive and perfect for that. Yeah, so that's the more you know, the more you find cool things out there. So.
Yeah. Well, that's great that you brought it back from the dustbin of history so people can get it. So will people be able to order that in 2026?
Yeah, that's one we're adding this year.
Okay.
Beginning of January, a couple weeks here.
Cool. That's so cool that you planted them in the year of release. That actually reminds me of something. I went to a greenhouse conference one time, and there was a Dutch researcher there who was talking about how they were curious whether the yield on greenhouse tomatoes had gone up over time or if it was just the technology. Yeah. And so he went to some like seed vault or something and bought like similar kind of thing. Like he got old greenhouse tomato varieties back as far as he could and planted them along with all the modern varieties. And sure enough, they found, I forget, they had kind of like a number, but they found that the yield, maybe not the flavor, but the yield was getting a little better. Sure enough, like, yeah, the older varieties, like they could see incremental progress on the tomatoes over time, which kind of makes sense because they were talking about how the price that growers are getting for greenhouse tomatoes hasn't really changed a whole lot over the last couple decades. So they were saying that if the only way to make a profit or to increased profit was by increasing yield, and that seemed to be going along with the varieties. But I like your bean example. That's really cool. That you went to the trouble of trialing that many.
It was interesting because I was expecting there to be like old beans that had this intense beany flavor that was like old timey or whatever, and then the new beans were all going to be like watery and juicy and snappy, and it was mixed. And it was interesting how like in like the 80s and 90s, it was like, oh, there was a huge breakthroughs in quality of like green beans. They're all really sweet and delicious and good texture. And then something happened in the 2000s and 2010s where it was like they started getting tougher and really straight, like perfectly straight beans became the thing. And they lost the really good texture, a lot of them. And a lot of them became like dark green and had this grassy flavor that wasn't quite as delicious because it just had but recently in the past 10 or 20 years, they've started getting better texture and flavor again. So it's like this evolution in bean breeding that from like hand harvest to mechanical harvest to like perfect wholesale bean, exactly the ones you like that the market wants. And then they're like, oh, we messed up. We got to make them taste good again. So they're starting to make them taste good again. So it's kind of cool to see that process. It's not a perfectly linear, we're getting shittier in flavor as we go. It's like actually gets better in the end, which is kind of hopeful.
Yeah, that is encouraging in a way. I mean, that like I think of most all vegetable varieties pretty much are a compromise. If you know what I don't know, there might be a few varieties out there that are just like perfect, but once again, it comes down to the person's farm, right? Like, you know, the perfect variety in Maine might not be the perfect variety in Alabama, right? So there's a few unicorns out there that are like perfect varieties for certain people's farms, but then most varieties are kind of a compromise between like yield, flavor, disease resistance, and like if you think of all the things that we're selecting our varieties for. And so I think, you know, the modern thing is really in a lot of crops is to prioritize yield over flavor. Like, I mean, there's tons of tomatoes out there that don't really taste that good. I feel like that's a good example, but have a lot of shelf life or are very productive in those kinds of things. So
we really like making accessible as much biodiversity and plant genetics as possible, because you never know what you're going to need in the long term, and short-term gains don't always lead to long-term gains in plant breeding. So yeah,
true. So on your website, I know that you grow a lot of the seed that you sell, and if you didn't, you say who did on the packet. Why do you put the grower names on the seed?
Oh yeah, we like the transparency of telling people where they're getting their seeds from. We were inspired by some older seed companies like Turtle Tree, and that like had that as like one of their fundamental, like they really wanted you to know who the seed grower was for various reasons. And we thought that was a really great idea, especially for if it was a seed grower that was saving and producing a variety that was one of their specialties that they really liked, that they had a longer term relationship with. You could know that, oh, I really like that particular kale strain that particular grower has. And it's a little bit esoteric for some people, but a lot of like growers really know that like some strains of even the same variety are better than others. And we really like sharing that transparency. Also, it helps our customers realize that we just really value transparency and honesty. And we're not trying to fool people with inaccurate descriptions. We just want everything to be truthful, and so people can know the whole story. And I just really like that when I saw it the first time. I wanted to continue that on as a tradition, try to help encourage other people to do that as well, because it also supports that grower. So maybe one of our growers, I think we only have about 20 growers aside from us. Like we grow about 80% of the seeds ourselves, and maybe 20% contracted to or sourced from other people. But I think it might be helpful for them to, like, other seed companies might be like, oh, they're really good at growing arugula. I want to go contact them and see if they can produce this arugula for us. So something like that is really nice. Also, like, one of the first years we did a trial of, I think, 3 or 4 red Russian kale varieties. One of them was stewarded for a decade down in Southern California. One of them was stewarded for a few decades in Southern Oregon. and another one was stewarded up in Washington in the Puget Sound area. And they're all red Russian kale. And like, you think red Russian kale is boring, it's the same thing. And we planted them all, and it was shocking how different they reacted on our farm to the growing conditions. Wow. And the one from Washington did great all winter long, and it was just super excited. It was like, ooh, rain, cold, I love it. The one from California was just like sad and like almost went dormant and almost died. But then like in the hot months, the stuff from Southern Oregon and California did really, really well and produced a lot longer into the hot months. And the Southern Oregon one was kind of it was pretty good at dealing with heat and pretty good at dealing with cold. So it was kind of like the best of both worlds, even if it wasn't the best at both worlds. So it was kind of fun to see that. And like knowing that like, if you have a strain of something that you're trying to steward, recognizing the steward of that strain is almost as important as the variety itself, I think.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense. It's nice to give credit where it's due.
Also, it encourages people to not just grow what contracts they get. Maybe they want to have some of their own special crops that they're really good at growing for other seed companies, that it's their thing that they're going to continuously produce. I think that long-term relationship with a variety as a farmer is something that I like to encourage as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, that's cool. And yeah, who knows? Maybe it'll make people think about growing a seed crop on their farm.
Yeah.
All right. Well, so one of the techniques you talk about on your website using is dehybridization. For example, I think you got at least a few varieties that you talk about dehybridizing. One example that stood out to me was Orange You Glad tomato. In fact, on that one, you say that you aren't convinced it even was a hybrid to begin with. So can you tell us what dehybridization is and give us a real life example of how did you approach it with Orange You Glad tomato or another variety of your choice, if there's another one that you'd like to talk about with dehybridization?
I guess the quick story with the Orange You Glad was that we just saved seed on it, and it didn't seem to have any variability in the F2 or F3. And we've been saving seed on it since, and it seems to be a very, very stable pedigree. And I can't be sure, because maybe it was a hybrid between two like sister lines. One of them had verticillium resistance and one of them had early blight resistance. And the only way to get it both at the same time was to cross the two very closely related lines, because certain combinations of genes you can only have together as a hybrid in rare circumstances. So maybe it was that. That's like best case scenario. Or maybe the company that was producing the seed, it used to be a hybrid, and then they spent a couple years selecting an OP version in order to save themselves money producing the seed, but still sold it as a hybrid. That's happened in the past, I'm sure. So I don't know. I'm not sure about that, but it turned out really easy and it was really great. We've tried dehybridizing sun gold, and that has been impossible. So there's like, it depends on the crop, or the variety, like even with tomatoes, some are easy, some are nearly impossible to create an open pollinated version of the hybrid. So that is kind of interesting. The two sun golds that we have that are, one is called California Sun Gold and one is called Santiam Sunrise. They both have some of the traits of the original Sun Gold, but neither of them have all of the traits of the original Sun Gold. So it's interesting. I heard the rumor that might have been a double hybrid, a hybrid of two hybrids. They have to maintain 4 inbred lines to create that hybrid at any time, which is kind of complicated and interesting. But so because of that complicated genetics, there's certain traits and certain flavors that are really hard to all have in the same seed. And that was one of their ways of making that happen. So and when you have something like that, if you try to dehybridize it, you get some very interesting things that are not at all like the variety. And you get lots of segregating traits and unexpected things that can lead to special new varieties that are nothing like the original, but are also cool in their own way. One of my favorite dehybridizations is I had a hybrid jalapeno that I really liked. And I wanted to create an OP jalapeno that was easy to grow, similar to early jalapeno, but more productive and higher quality fruit. And so I chose a good hybrid that I wanted to select from. And it surprised me in what it segregated the two different main kind of phenotypes that it wanted to make. Like if you save seed on something, you can kind of select for the things you like, but oftentimes the plant does what it wants. It's like, oh, here's the things that I kind of want to be, considering that the parents that I had. So one of the easy selections that I got to make from this jalapeno was a short, kind of squat, rounder jalapeno that was perfect for stuffing. And so we end up calling it party popper jalapeno. It's because it's perfect for making jalapeno poppers. And it's like a perfect 2-bite. It's not a giant jalapeno, but it's like perfect size and shape for that process. And it's a unique shape and color. And the color's not unique, but it's got a nice color and a nice shine to it. And then the other line that came out of that we're going to release this year is, I call it Hala Spike. And it's more pointy, more spike shaped, and has some of that classic corky etching, like the check marks on the outside of the fruit when it's perfectly ripe, green ripe. You know it's going to taste the best when it has a little bit of that checking on the outside. It's an old trick that people used to make, or used to know. People used to know that before industrial hybrid jalapenos became perfectly smooth all the time. The people in the know would be like, they taste the best when they get a little bit of that checking on the outside. That's how you know that they're just right for picking. And also, I got excited for that because when they're red ripe and they have those check marks on them, they dry easier, and they kind of like almost dry on their own without very much extra heat or airflow. And they also absorb smoke really easily. So they make really good chipotles or smoked jalapenos, morritas. So those like the things that like the industry is moving completely away from that, but I kind of want to bring it back because I think it was cool. So that was a surprise to me. Yeah.
For people who know, right? So that's what I was thinking while you were saying that is like people who aren't familiar with jalapenos might see that checking and think like it's a defect or something, right? And I was thinking the other thing is that it's probably bad for shelf life, right? Is that, like you said, they dry out easier because there's the checking is little like imperfections in the skin, or I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't call it imperfections, because clearly, like, yeah, if you wanted to dry them, it would be great. And that's the traditional way. I mean, I think that's the traditional way that jalapenos have been, right? Is that, like you said, to have, like, get a little bit of that checking on there. Probably, though, like, I don't know. I feel like people are so conditioned to want their produce to look perfect that, like, people who aren't used to buying jalapenos might even think there's something wrong with it. So that's cool.
And I'm trying to acknowledge that as well, as knowing that our plant breeding is a service we're providing for people. Like, we want to not like force them into something. We want to actually acknowledge what they want as well. So my next jalapeno breeding project is going to be creating an open pollinated giant jalapeno, like the big jumbo ones that for some reason the entire market has switched to over the past couple years, where they're like 3 times bigger than a typical jalapeno, but they're still labeled as a jalapeno. And they're all hybrids. And so that's an opportunity for me to create an open pollinated version that people can save seed on. And that one almost certainly needs to be perfectly smooth, because that's what people want. It's also a unique type of jalapeno who knew that there was that many kinds of jalapenos out there, which is also fun to find diversity within a category.
Yeah. I mean, it does make me wonder if there's different jalapenos for different markets, based on preference. I'm not intimately familiar with the jalapeno market, so I don't know, but
it is easier to pick a giant one than 3 little ones. That's for sure.
That's what I was just thinking. If I were like, as a farmer, I want to pick the big one.
Yeah.
I'd rather pick one big one than 3 little ones. I mean, that really, like, the fruit size really impacts labor. Yeah, if people like the big ones, I think that would be great if people got to like the big ones, because then people would want to buy the one that I want to grow. So
yeah,
that's interesting what you said about all the diversity in sun gold, though, because I've heard of some other people who tried to dehybridize sun gold, and yeah, they said there was like very diverse. When they grew out the successive generations, there was a lot of variability in it. Actually, you used a term that I think people might not be familiar with. You used the term inbred. I think you called it inbred line.
Yeah.
Can you quickly define that? Just because I think if people don't know that term, that's a good one to know for talking about breeding?
Well, in traditional hybrid production, you have two parents, and they are usually inbred lines. So you purposefully self them until they are genetically very uniform. So you know exactly what those two parents have potential genetically for when you're making the cross. It's going to be consistent and the same every time, but also you're narrowing down the diversity of those inbred lines. So you're only getting the things that you want into the hybrid F1. And it's unfortunately that can create very low vigor, sad inbred parents that don't do very well. But then by hybridizing them, you get the heterosis and the restoration of vigor, which then can create not only vigorous plants, but uniformity at the same time. Like that's the fundamental trick of hybrids, is creating uniformity and vigor simultaneously, where those two things don't tend to exist in nature without this trick. It's an interesting thing that is most of the crops we eat are hybrids now, because not because they are a good plant that has been bred, but because it suits the industry's need for uniformity and perfection and a short harvest window, or plants that have the same exact shape or size. It is interesting that I'm so kind of reactionary against hybrids, but also as a former producer know how helpful they are as a tool. So my goal would be to take these in, if you save seed off of a hybrid, that F2 and F3, a lot of the times you get a whole bunch of the low vigor kind of traits from the inbred lines, the parents. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that pops out that's really not doing very well when you save seed off of a hybrid that's a wide cross. So that's the inbred lines is interesting. It sounds really bad. It's the inbred parents, but it is part of the process of making a hybrid.
I know I was talking with somebody about inbreeding depression one time, and they were like, inbreeding depression, which I mean, tell me I've got, I mean, inbreeding depression is what we think of why we don't try not to have people and animals get inbred, it's inbreeding over time does usually results in bad things.
Yeah, and if you're saving seed and you're only saving seed off of a few plants of inbreeding depression sensitive species, some species are not inbreeding depression sensitive, others are. If you only save seed off of 3 cabbage plants for 5 years in a row, you're going to end up with something pretty inbred and sick. And so you got to know to avoid that if you're going to be doing seed saving or plant breeding. But which is one of the reasons why open pollinated varieties can be really vigorous and very productive. If they have a background of biodiversity in the genome, they can actually have that vigor, but then they oftentimes don't have the uniformity in that situation. But if you do, it is possible to have both in an OP. It just takes a lot of work and a lot of knowledge and a lot of time to select for that quality. And I've seen open pollinated varieties that outperform hybrids in a lot of ways, but not in every circumstance, but it is possible.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's worth noting hybridization is not magic. It's not like all hybrid varieties are definitely not better. Well, that was interesting. I feel we could probably do just a 5-hour episode on plant breeding. Probably, maybe not today. Although, yeah, I mean, today would probably be a good day to let people know who you are. But on the other hand, I could imagine having you on again sometime to talk more about plant breeding or something. But yeah, we should probably stick more to adaptive.
Yeah, that's good. I like talking about plant breeding, but also I'm not the most knowledgeable plant breeder as far as the technical side of things, because I do plant breeding where the opportunity arrives and where I'm excited to do it. And I think that people should feel comfortable doing that kind of plant breeding. You don't have to be an academic. You don't have to be a big seed company plant breeder. You don't have to be perfect at it. It's just something that you can learn over time and play with and create some good stuff. It shouldn't be intimidating. That's kind of my takeaway with plant breeding. Try it.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. I mean, that's the heritage we have, right? Is that farmers were the original plant breeders, and probably some of them more actively than others. I mean, like anything else. But so I think that I don't know. I get it. Like when we were first getting into farming, I was so I remember being so enthusiastic about everything. I was like, learned about like fermenting your tomato seeds and like skimming off the fermented scum and like what the good ones sink to the bottom and all that. I was like, oh, and I did some of that. But then like as we got more into farming, I was just like, I can't do everything. And so, I mean, actually that made me value buying seeds from somebody else. I was like, wow, it's a lot of work, not only to like the extraction, but maintaining the variety, breeding good varieties in the first place and all that kind of thing. So I think in a way, like messing around with seed, like harvesting seeds, made me respect how much effort goes into it, and it made me happy to pay for it in a way because I could see how much work went into it. So, but that said, I think it's really awesome that people can breed their own varieties on working farms.
Yeah. And even if it's just a couple things, that's really great. Just like if you have a couple specialties that as a farmer or a gardener that you're really into, it's your favorite thing, having a few of your own selections is really, really helpful. It's kind of like we don't expect farmers to buy all of our random, crazy, weird seeds from us and expect to run a successful vegetable production farm, but they could have a couple cool things from us and a couple of their own cool things that they could select so they don't have the same exact varieties that every single farmer at the farmer's market has from a few companies. I think that might be our niche in the market. We mostly sell to gardeners and people with large gardens or like plant nerds and geeks that want to try new things. But we also really value like organic farmers buying a few varieties from us that do really well for them, that is like things that distinguishes them as like not having the same stuff, which is really that makes me feel like I've done a good job when that happens. I don't expect them to plant everything from us because that just is it gets pretty wild.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the point, as long as you have some varieties that work really well for people, or like there's a variety that you guys have, I'm blanking on the name, that so my wife has a nursery business, and so she was trying to find a replacement for Early Girl, just I think because that was a Seminus variety, and trying not to buy that. And so and I'm blanking on the variety that I forget if you said it was a dehybridized version of Early Girl or something like that, or just like this is a very early slicing tomato that, in fact, I think I saw it in your catalog, and I think I bought it because I knew she was looking for that, and that ended up working out well for us here in Maine.
Yeah, it might have been a Perfect Rogue, which was
that's the one.
When I worked on another farm, we planted like 4 hoop houses full of Early Girl tomatoes, and there was a couple plants in those hoop houses that were potato leaf and not quite right. And we're like, oh, somebody didn't pollinate this hybrid seed. And so this might be one of the inbred lines, one of the parents. And so I saved it. I dug it up. I saved seed, and it didn't really segregate that much, maybe a little bit, but so it might have been a cross it's hard to tell sometimes what's actually going on. And that one, yeah, it's not a real dehybridization. It's not anything like Early Girl, but it produces well and tastes good. Mm-hmm. And it was a rogue in the field that turned out good. And I don't know. It's interesting to think about that when you're planting your hybrid tomato seeds out and you see an off type and you think, oh, that sucks. There's one they didn't do a good job. But then thinking about how that seed is almost certainly being produced out in like the deserts of China by like people that might not want to be there, hand pollinating things all day long for weeks at a time to make this hybrid seed that is owned by corporations and shipped back and forth across continents. It just seems a little bit, it makes it real when you see like a little bit of reality in something that's usually perfect. It kind of opens up a door to what it actually went into making the thing, which is not always good.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So like a good plant breeder, you see the weird one and you're like, ooh.
Yeah, exactly.
I want to work with that.
Yeah.
And now let's take a minute to hear from our sponsors. It's with their generous support that we can bring you the podcast for free. A well-built high tunnel is one of the smartest investments a small farm can make. It protects your crops, extends your season, and keeps income rolling in even through winter. Nifty Hoops builds complete Gothic high tunnels that are easy to install and built to last. Their easy, bolt-together construction makes setup straightforward and efficient, whether it's a small backyard hoop house or a dozen large production-scale high tunnels. Especially through their community build option, where professional builders work alongside your crew, family, or neighbors to build each structure, usually in a single day. Most growers go with Nifty's full setup: steel-framed end walls, roll-up sides, baseboards, double plastic with inflation, automated vents, and real doors, all priced to make the best choice the easy one. Nifty is a small crew out of Michigan using U.S. steel and working hands-on with growers across the country. They'll help evaluate your site, handle NRCS paperwork, and if they're building with you, they'll even float your cost share until after the build. Visit niftyhoops.com to learn more. Farm more seasons. Grow more food. Nifty Hoops. Farmers who partnered with Farmhand grew an average of 63% this year because it's more than software. Farmhand acts as your business coach and assistant, helping you sell out, save time, and grow smarter. From marketing to fulfillment to customer support, Farmhand pulls real data from what's worked and what hasn't for other farms and turns it into websites that convert, campaigns that sell, and fulfillment systems that give you your time back. Curious what that looks like? Meet the founder, Ari, at farmhand.partners/GFM and see the same insights and support the fastest growing farms rely on every week. That's farmhand.partners/GFM. And now, back to the show. I have a question for you, is that when people see variation, like let's say they bought like a hybrid or what, like doesn't even have to be a hybrid, whatever variety, some variety they like, and then when they see one plant that's not like the others, I mean, it could be a few different things. It could be a mutation, could be the wrong seed, right? I mean, things aren't perfect. Occasionally, like
most of the time,
it
was a mix-up.
Well, I've thought about that, is like how many of the like mutants in the world are really just like the wrong seed going in the packet. But like, I think the point is you don't really know until you've gotten it. And like, you don't know if like a plant that's different is the wrong seed in the wrong packet, truly a mutation or some other kind of like sport or, like you said, like a hybrid that didn't get crossed because yeah, of course, during the hybridization process, nothing's 100%. Like even like hybrids. I mean, I think they can do hybridity testing on a crop, like see how well, they'll have people do parent 1 with parent 2. And then, I think they test, not everyone in the world, but I think like a lot of companies can do a hybridity test to see how well, they want it. Like, I think there's a standard for the industry. If your hybrid turns out at only 80%, like, I think that's not saleable. Like, I don't know what the laws are, but I know you can do a hybridity test. And the point of that is it's not 100%. So if one possibility is, like you said, if you buy a seed that's supposed to be hybrid and one's different, could be a lot of different things. One of the things could be, essentially, like, you might have gotten a parent line, essentially, where that one particular plant didn't get the genetics from the hybridization, and it's more like one or the other of the parents. So, I mean, I've thought about that so many times, of people being like, I found a new variety in my packet. Like, maybe they did, but I think, is there anything else I'm missing there? Like, is there anything else that you can think of that would cause a variety to look different than what it's supposed to be, other than mutants, sports, wrong side, or like, actually, I don't even know. I mean, a sport is just kind of like another name for a mutant, right? So there's like mutation, wrong seed and wrong packet, non-hybridized. Like, are there anything else you can think of where people might find interesting genetics?
Yeah, there's diversity within a variety that comes in. Like, not there's self-pollinated varieties, and then there's varieties that tend to predominantly cross-pollinate or outbreed every year. And those cross-pollinating varieties or species tend to have a little bit more variability, whereas the self-pollinating species tend to be almost genetically uniform a lot of the time, unless there's a sport or an accidental cross or a bumblebee got really excited and tore open a flower before it selfed. Those things do happen. I would say that one of the most common things is that like a lot of seed growers are really good at going into their fields and roguing off op types or keeping it like maintaining the variety so it's genetically uniform to what it's supposed to be. But then when you start getting stuff into your seed cleaning machines, or you're mechanically harvesting, or you're moving from one bucket to another, like it's really easy for a couple seeds to like find their secret little hidey hole and get mixed into another lot. That does happen. It's more common than people know. Also, like you were saying, the different hybridization fails and things like that. But like, I would say that the most common thing is that without breeding varieties that really like to cross-pollinate within a population, so they're constantly breeding amongst each other, like a corn or a spinach, or there's a bunch of things out there. Sunflowers are classics. Like, if you can have the variety, if there's a little bit of off-type in there, and the seed steward doesn't remove that off-type immediately, or like within a generation or two, that off-type can contribute enough pollen in those varieties that it starts to change the nature of the population. You get like, oh, this corn was mostly orange, but now it's starting to get a little bit of white stuff, like white kernels in there. Or like, this is a red petals in my yellow sunflower. How'd that get in there? Like, it's like that stuff can happen over time. So which is why like variety maintenance and roguing and selecting for quality is important every single year. You don't have to be perfect at it, because a lot of varieties are variable within a short range, and like people don't notice, and they actually find it useful to have a little bit of genetic diversity within the variety, as long as there's not anything wrong or really off type about it that starts to pop out. Or like like a radish is something that like you want every radish to taste good and be crunchy and nice, but sometimes every once in a while the radishes start to get a little bit, they rewild themselves, they go a little bit feral. So you have to constantly be selecting for a good quality radish so it doesn't get pithy or too many little rootlets on it. And so certain species and certain crops require more maintenance than others. Others, like a bean or a lettuce, you just have to look for off types and sports and remove them. And like within a generation or two of doing that, you can clean up a variety really quickly. Other things like squash that you don't know, like it might have a recessive gene that pops green fruit and you wish they were all yellow. And it might take some more advanced selection to get that green trait out. Like so it really depends on the crop. But yeah, that's where I get really excited to see all the chaos and complications when it comes to seed saving. It's never-endingly amusing.
Well, speaking of chaos, we've bought seeds from you before, but also, I was trying to do my homework for this interview and looking at like what you're offering right now. I know you have a few different varieties that like intentionally have a lot of variation left in there. Mm-hmm. And maybe variety isn't even the right word, but one other thing I appreciate about you guys is that it seems like you are encouraging people to do some breeding themselves. And my understanding is that one of the points of offering some of those mixes, I think you have a dry corn that the name is escaping me that has a range of different colors, which might be nice. It's like nice to, people can either go buy 3 different varieties if they want a mix of corn colors and perhaps even flavors and things like that, or they can buy a mix with some variability. So I want to let you take it though and say, can you say a little bit about those? I don't even know if mix is the right word, but can you tell us what the varieties that you offer that maybe aren't even perfect varieties, but are, have variation in them, and how am I right that you're trying to encourage people to do maybe take a variety that has some variation and do their own selection work on it? They can make their own variety essentially.
Yeah, I love it when other people take our stuff and save seed on it or create their own variety. Is one of the biggest joys I get. A lot of people can be very protective of their own thing, and they think they identify with it and they don't want people stealing it. I don't kind of see the world that way, and I really want to share, because I had so many people shared their material with me, and that was so cool that I just wouldn't want it any other way moving forward. So I really want other people to take our seeds and save them and not have to worry about whether or not they have to ask permission or not. And so that's one benefit of having like a 14 kale varieties crossed into one population is like, of course, that's what that's for. But also, one of the benefits of having that is that there's so much biodiversity within that population. So you could consider it a population, so it's not a pedigree, but it is a population of like a lot of crossbreeding individuals that the population has a stability to it, even though it's kind of like moving constantly within a framework of what that variety is. It's still a variety, even though it's very biodiverse. And that biodiversity has a lot of benefits, including being able to select your own pedigree out of it or select your own unique variety from that population as like a breeding gene pool. In Europe, they've started they have a new law that allows them to have heterogeneous populations. So instead of having everything be regulated as like specific varieties, farmers are allowed to save seed and grow and sell varieties that are mixes, and heterogeneous is another word for it. A lot of people have a lot of different terms for it. It's very confusing. There's heterogeneous populations, there's breeding gene pool mixes, there's diverse populations, there's grexes, we have a bunch of varieties that we call remixes. So like, I don't know, it's kind of, I'm happy that there's not a one word for this thing, because it is a good thing. One of my favorite reasons to have it is because it creates a variety that you only have to save seed of once, and you have so much genetic diversity within that variety that you could adapt it to a new climate. It could be more resilient to disease pressure and pest pressure. If you're in an area that is high risk for climate change, it can be helpful for adapting to that kind of situation. Because if you only have a pedigree that's a particular inbred line, it's not going to be adaptable and resilient. It's going to be really good at one thing. So having lots of diversity in that population is helpful for a lot of reasons. And we like to provide that because it has so many benefits, especially for adaptation or future varieties, or just like beauty. Sometimes it's just really fun to have a bunch of unique things that are surprising, or you don't want to just have one specific collard green. You want to have 10. Like you could plant just one bed of mix of collard greens. And we tend to do that for varieties that have utility and functionality as a population. I would not want a hot pepper and a sweet pepper population. I would not want a delicata cross with a zucchini population. That would be terrible. That'd be like the worst delicata and the worst zucchini, and you never know what you're gonna get. So like it's not like cross everything and see what happens. It's think about what you might want to cross for a particular goal of resilience and adaptation and beauty. Like people don't complain about rainbow chard. Why would they complain about a kale bunch with 4 colors in it? So like that kind of thing.
Right.
Like I like that. And like the corn you mentioned, I think Cascade Ruby Gold corn is a flint corn that has 3 colors. And the red corn tastes completely different than the yellow corn. And the orange corn tastes different as well. So you can take these single color cobs, shell them separately, and create like a red corn meal that has a different flavor profile than the other one. So you can have different use cases, but only plant one field of it. But if you had a corn that was completely rainbow mixed on a single cob, you would get the mix of all those flavors. Like Painted Mountain corn is a classic example of like, you grind Painted Mountain corn and you get this like, it's a really heavy, rich flavor corn because it has so many dark reds and blues and purples and stuff. You don't really taste the whites or the light yellows because it's very rich and everything's mixed together. But you could, if you had single color cobs, actually notice the difference in those flavors. So we're not just crossing things completely. They're crossed in a way that has utility and like is useful as a mixture. And Painted Mountain has a use as a mixture for other reasons, which is really fascinating and cool because it's so biodiverse and so resilient that it's unstoppable and it tastes good as a mix. But the others have a different use as well.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, I can see how you wouldn't want the sweet pepper hot pepper mix. That would be almost like a shishito pepper, actually. I mean, isn't it where like every 10th one is really hot or something like that? But so can you, like off the top of your head, can you just give an example? Like, yeah, I know you're saying not everything is a candidate for that, but can you just give a few examples off the top of your head of those, of like some of the populations, some of those varieties that have a lot of variation in them that you guys sell?
Well, as a single farm with not that many growers to help us, I was struggling to figure out which Queenie Lime zinnia I wanted to grow here. So I bought them all and planted them all out and decided I would choose the one I wanted the most and grow that one. And then maybe if we could figure out in isolation, we could grow a couple others later, or maybe have multiple varieties. But because I planted them all out in a single bed and I liked them all, I just let them all cross-pollinate and save seed as a party mix. So we have a Queenie Lime zinnia party mix now that's like, we've grown it a few times, and some of the non-dominant colors are not as frequent in the population anymore, but we're getting some unique things popping out of it too that we had never seen before. So it's kind of like, that was like a no-brainer for me. It was like of course we're just going to let them all cross together. Like, this would be fine and be kind of cool too. And there's other growers out there that are producing the individual varieties of that series, doing a good job selecting those varieties by themselves as like particular lines. So I was like, oh, they can do that and we can do this. Both will be good.
Yeah, you guys can do the party mix.
Yeah.
It sounds more fun too.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, since you do encourage people to do their own breeding, do you have any quick tips for people who might want to work on a variety?
I would say if you just want to casually learn about plant breeding and get into it and dabble, like, do whatever you are inspired to do, and it's fine. It'll be good. It'll be fun. But if you want to be more heavy, like more powerful in like a particular way, you have a different set of goals where you're trying to achieve something specific, or you might want to see what's out there and really get to know the species or the category or the market class, like become an expert in that market class. So like I have recently become an expert in the jalapeno market class. Which is something funny. It's funny to me, but like that's something that like that makes it so you can eventually be able to see what's possible. It's really hard as like a person who's never really spent that much time with sunflowers to get into sunflower breeding in a way that is like specific or has like you have a goal and that you achieve like you. But in order to get good at sunflowers, you need to start seeing stuff and learn about pollen and all this other stuff that I don't know about, and as far as like sterility and all these things. But it's something that like there's so many places where you could go, it's kind of impossible to do everything. And I think that's one of our shortcomings as a company and as my plant breeding. Like I try to do too many things, so I never get super deep into stuff. Sometimes we're just seeing what's possible. But so yeah, whatever your personality is, whatever, just like go with it and see what's possible and talk to people. And most plant breeders are really excited to talk about plant breeding and share their knowledge and help each other. So it's a good place to be. It's a good community to be part of.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, and maybe not do a ton of crops. Like I'm thinking like market farmers tend to have a lot going on already. It's probably a lot easier to have one breeding project, which actually kind of makes sense. I feel like a lot of growers that I know have like a variety that they kind of like might want to work on, and so it's probably a lot easier to work on that if you're just doing one, or not doing a ton along with market farming.
Also, if you're really type A or really really intense about it, it can be quite humbling and it can teach you to let things go And the more you're attached to certain outcomes, sometimes the less likely you're to achieve them, it seems. They test us, the plants test us. And like, you might want to try like 3 or 4 things, because 2 of those things might lead to nowhere. It might just be an idea that didn't turn out. Like, I've saved seed and done crosses with tomatoes that like generation 4 years in, just like given up because they just weren't doing anything that I thought was going to lead anywhere good. But then other times you are surprised by what's possible. So I would try a few things. Don't just have one special thing. But yeah, try stuff.
Okay. Yes, nature will humble us. Sometimes you'll do orange you glad. Sometimes you'll do orange you glad, and it'll work out pretty quickly. And then sometimes you'll realize you're on a wild goose chase that's never going to go where you want it to.
Yeah.
I read Carol Depp's book, Breed Your Own Vegetable Varieties. Another good Oregonian.
Yeah,
She's from Oregon, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I thought that was a pretty good book.
It's a great book. There's a lot of great fun stories. She makes it sound fun. If you read that book, it makes you want to do that too.
Yeah.
Which is cool. Yeah, Carol's been on the Open Source Seed Initiative board with me for a long time, so I've been working with Carol a bit over the past few years, so it's been great.
Oh, cool. I like her stuff. She's written a few other books, but that is a fun book and would be a good place to start. Breed Your Own Vegetable Varieties if people
It's a classic.
Want to know more, and until we do a 5-hour plant breeding episode, but not today. Okay, well, speaking of the Open Source Seed Initiative, on your website you say, we believe proprietary control schemes such as hybrids, patenting, PVP, and trademarking are stifling resilient innovation and diversity. Can you explain what PVP even is and patenting in relation to seeds and how those are affecting the seed trade?
Well, in any industry, the intellectual property is often the most valuable part of an enterprise. And there's been over 100 years of trying to figure out how to have monopoly and proprietary control over plants and varieties. Because if someone can just grow the same thing you are for cheap and undercut you, it's hard to pay for the plant breeding a lot of the time. So the goal has often been to try to create better plants and to try to support plant breeders. But oftentimes, in the end, I believe it's actually created a really bad business model that leads to very top-down control of genetic resources, very difficult to share genetics and germplasm and varieties between people in the industry. And it's been very anti-collaborative, very competitive, and kind of gone to a place that I really don't want to have any part in. And it does create the capital to breed and select new varieties and hybrids that can do really cool things. However, I believe that it's, in the end, stifling innovation in total, even if the system facilitates certain kinds of innovation. I think that it's having more of a public domain system where people can share stuff and like actually work with each other and breed things, even if it's not like 100%. You can't extort money from people because you can't patent it and be like, well, you owe me because you save seed off of this thing. I think that in the end, it creates a culture that is not something that I think is beneficial. In the end, it's more long-term versus short-term benefits, I believe. And it's creating a situation where there's so much genetic resources lost, either to it being owned by corporations or because it wasn't being saved by farmers anymore because everyone was compelled to switch to proprietary hybrids or patented varieties because of economic concerns and like productivity concerns. And I just think it's the intellectual property of plants is going to be bad in the end. And if you think about it from like a moral standpoint, what is the justification to say that you can own an organism? It's not a toaster. You didn't invent anything. You're playing with genes and the environment and claiming that it's yours. And I like to say that even the plants that we breed, we might have spent 10 years like really working hard and like working on stuff, but like that is a tiny little bit of dust of frosting on that cake. It's not even like, it's barely any like powdered sugar like sprinkled on top of it. It's not even like, most of the work involved in that variety has been done for thousands of years before me. And like to be the first person in the long lineage of sharing and collaboration to be like, no, this is mine. This is owned by the corporation now, and you can't touch it because we want to charge 3 times more for it so we can fund our program. Seems like a really bad deal to me, even though it's an economic reality that we exist in. And because of that, I like to just signal to everyone that I'm doing the opposite and we're doing the opposite, and we like sharing and we like building community around things and not being particular and not having this like fake sense of ownership over things that we barely did that much in the end. Like it might have cost a couple $1 million for Seminus to breed a new variety, but like really that's kind of this artificial little bit that they've done, and I don't think it's justifiable to have patents on life. But we used to exist in a reality of the government had PVPs, which is plant variety protection, which is a legal scheme that makes it so you can have a temporary monopoly over distribution of a variety. So if you've bred it and you've registered it with the USDA, you can have 20 years where you're the only ones that are allowed to sell that new variety, and it's been certified by the USDA, but it goes into the GRIN gene bank. So once that PVP expires, it becomes officially public domain. So other breeders can breed with it after 20, and also there used to be exemptions where you couldn't sell the variety, but you could cross it into your stuff. So you could start a breeding project immediately. So it might delay, like you might be able to have a new variety that had that as one of its parents in 10 years, but the original variety in the marketplace is like only allowed to be sold by one company.
Okay.
So it's like patenting, but it's like a lightweight version that still, it kind of balances proprietary monopoly and like the needs of the world to innovate with plants and to be able to share the stuff that is our collective heritage. But patents have become the norm, which you can't even trial or do research on a patented variety without approval by the corporation or the people that bred it. And then there's licensing agreements that have like a control over a variety in perpetuity that without getting their approval, you're not even allowed to save seed on it. Or like even like, so like, there's a lot of like, I've had bag tags on varieties that say you're not allowed to research this, you're not allowed to save seed on this, you're not allowed to do anything. You're only allowed to, you are being given a temporary license to plant this seed, harvest the crop, and sell the produce. Nothing else is allowed. You do not own the seed. You are licensing the privilege to use it, its function. So like that just is like, that's just going into a bad place fast. And so because of that, we decided to release all of our breeding material public domain, and then also as open source seed initiative pledged, which is an official pledge of the open source seed initiative that announces that anyone who uses this seed has the freedom to use it in any way they want, as long as they don't patent it or trademark it or control its intellectual property. So it's kind of like the GPL in software, where yes, it's open source, but anything you create from it, any derivative of that work, is also open source de facto. So it's like if you save seed, or if you select a variety out of Open Oak Party Mix corn, and you want just the red corns, and you select your own new variety off of our Aussie pledged corn, that would be a derivative of Open Oak corn. So it would be immediately, it would be Aussie pledged because it's a derivative. So it's an open source that's like viral. It just keeps going. It's contagious in the best way. And it's kind of like, it's creating an alternative system to the corporate system that's saying like, no, you can't use these unless you want to share too. But if you want to share, you can use them. And that's kind of the radical part of that, which I think is really important. If we're going to create a baseline of biodiversity that is open access, that people have the ability to use and try and create new varieties of easily, we need that broad foundation of genetic material. It can't all be owned by like 6 multinational corporations that you have to have billions of dollars in capital to even like engage in that world as far as plant breeding.
Right. I can see why they would want that, but I can also see how that would be extremely stifling to plant breeding.
So it's a line of like, it's a challenge. It's like, how do you fund plant breeding, and how do you keep plant breeders employed or give them the ability to do that work? But also, how it's not just about being paid, it's about having the materials to do that work with. You can't get paid but then no longer have those materials to do that work with. You have to have both, or run a seed company and use the proceeds of the seed company to fund some weekend plant breeding like we do. So it's a challenge, but we think that the benefit of open sourcing varieties is extremely positive.
Yes. Well, and I can see the value that then the farmers can be developing. If they find a variety that works really well on their farm, they can run with it.
Yeah.
Which is how it's been done for a long time, and I see the value in that. Okay, well, good. I'm glad you Aussie, OSSI. Okay, because I'm glad I didn't realize that was how you would say the acronym, but that's catchy.
Yeah.
Okay, good. I'm glad you brought that up, because I noticed that some of the varieties in your catalog said they were Aussie, but you're saying everything in your catalog is Open Seed Source Initiative?
Well, no.
So
everything in our catalog is public domain. So this is something that confuses people sometimes. And Aussie is a specific protection of the public domain. So like anything that's like that no one owns is public. It's the public's inheritance. And so when I bred my new variety, I said it's not only public domain, but it's Aussie pledge. So it has that clarification that anything derivative is also Aussie. So, and we do it that way because you can't take an heirloom and say that it's Open Source Seed Initiative pledged, because you didn't do that breeding work. You don't have the right to say that that's Aussie. That's public domain.
Okay.
But if you're breeding something new and you want to give an extra layer of protection beyond public domain, Aussie is a way to do that. And so like we typically don't do anything that's heirloom or pre-existing in any way, or anything that has a dispute over who might be owning it. There's certain varieties that are claimed as like a cultural heritage of a particular group that you wouldn't want to you can't pledge that Aussie, because you can't ask every single person in that culture if it's okay. So it's a specific breeder releasing a new variety that is pledging it as Aussie. That's how that works.
Yeah. Okay, thank you for clarifying that, because I didn't quite understand the distinction between the two, and that makes a lot of sense now that you're saying it. Well, like, because wasn't there a company that was trying to patent like basmati rice or something, and people were like, no, like you can't patent.
Yeah, probably. There was a Peruvian yellow bean, I think, that was patented by a company, even though they didn't do any breeding work on it. They just decided that it was theirs and they owned the rights for it and no one else could sell it. And the patent office granted the patent. And it was like, okay, cool. But like, that's not actually legal according to the law. You can't do that because you didn't create it. You don't own it. You can't own it. But it took a decade and like hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees to get it get that patent overturned. So it's kind of a bad situation. But Aussie is like announcing ahead of time, you can't do that. Even though you're not supposed to, or you're not allowed to patent things that are common heritage or prior art or public domain. Aussie is kind of like being like, no way you're going to do that. We're putting up a fence. We're saying that if you want to patent stuff, you're not allowed over that fence. So it's kind of a little bit of a bolder take on that. And because it's a legal contract agreement as a pledge, it has weight in court if that ever did happen.
Okay. Well, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And like you were saying, there's like thousands of years of breeding work that's already been done by a lot of the people who grew any particular variety. So you can't say like, I'm going to patent Brandywine or make Brandywine Aussie, because the work has already been done by somebody else. In that case, like, we don't know. I don't think we know who bred Brandywine, just to take that as an example. But okay, that makes sense as a distinction that I'd never heard before. Okay, thank you for explaining that.
And the pledging process is pretty easy now. It used to be a little bit complicated, but the Aussie website, osseeds.org, has a pledge form where you can, if you are the breeder of a new variety, and you can describe a bit about the breeding project and kind of show that it wasn't bred from a patented variety, because you can't Aussie pledge that. That would be illegal as well. If you can describe it, you can submit it and consider it Aussie pledged. If it satisfies those conditions of being, you can't pledge an heirloom. If you did the breeding work and you can describe that you did it and show that that happened, then you can pledge your variety as Aussie.
Mm-hmm. Okay, right, because part of the important thing about having a new variety is you have to say how it's different from everything else. So you couldn't patent Brandywine, but you could cross Brandywine with striped German, stabilize that into something that you like, give it a new name, and then you could pledge that because it's different from Brandywine or striped German. Okay,
yeah, and it's kind of using the idea of the patent system and like licensing agreements and material transfer agreements and all that garbage. It's using that whole idea as a way to fight that idea. So it's a little cheeky in that way.
That's cool.
Yeah, and it feels good to share.
I like that.
That's my favorite part of it.
Yeah. Well, speaking of sharing, are there any varieties that you've helped to develop that you're particularly fond of or proud of, or just good examples of regionally adapted varieties that you've come up with? I want to just give you a chance to, like, you must have some favorite varieties. You want to just I just want to give you a chance to talk about some things that you really like that you've worked on.
It's really challenging it's like 20 things. It's like, which is a better, it's hard to choose your favorite children. You can't. Yeah.
I won't tell the other varieties that you didn't mention them on the podcast.
Yeah. Well, I guess the thing that's been most exciting to me recently is we have some habanero peppers that we've been selecting. I discovered an accidental cross in the greenhouse a decade ago between a hybrid habanero and a ají limon pepper that was supposed to be a Peruvian bacatum species pepper, but turned out to not be. It was the ají limon chinense species, which is the same as habanero, and they crossed, which was an accidental cross that turned out great because I saw that the following year. And so I was able to select a ají limon pepper and that hybrid habanero pepper. Like, it was a wide cross of a yellow, pointy, spiky, very, very hot pepper that had a bite to it, and that orange, rich, fruity, kind of warm building heat of a habanero that, like, we found it was a decade of fun of trying to breed cool things out of that cross, because it was a wide cross. We came up with a lot of interesting things. But there was a culinary breeding network, Sagra, this last month that we featured the Limon Lightning pepper. And they made a Limon Lightning sorbet that they tasted at the event, which was really exciting and really delicious. And I think that pepper is really cool, partly because it tastes good and it has a unique citrusy flavor, but it really grows well here. Capsicum chinense habanero species peppers are really hard to mature here sometimes because of our short season and our cooler weather and our cold nights. They really like that hot, humid weather, but for some reason, this cross created this little stocky, dense plant that produces tons of fruit real fast, and they all ripen before frost. And I feel proud of it, but it's also like not really mine because it was this accidental thing that I just like stewarded into existence. But it's real good, and without us selecting our favorites, it wouldn't have been what it is today. But I don't know. That's just like, every fall when we start harvesting those peppers, I get really excited to make some escabeche or something, and just like knowing that it's yours and also that other people like it too. And not everyone's going to like it because not everyone likes super hot peppers, but the people that do are really into it, which is fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I like hot peppers. Is it available? Like, are you selling it yet?
Yeah, the Limon Lightning we've been selling. There's a mini orange habanero that we added last year called Orange Embers, which has a unique flavor. It's also half as hot as a habanero, so it's a little bit more manageable for people. And then this year we're releasing a peach color habanero version of it. So those are the three cousins that came out of that cross, and I couldn't say no to any of them. So they're all coming into the catalog.
Well, cool. Yeah, we might have to check those out because my wife Annie makes a salsa with habaneros, and it's kind of it's touch and go up here in Maine as far as getting a lot of them to ripen. It's kind of hard to devote hoop house space to them, but they ripen better in there, and so this sounds interesting. Yeah, I'd like to try that.
Yeah, and they're all you need is a couple plants if you're just making salsa or hot sauce yourself, because they produce a lot of fruit.
Yeah. Yeah, well, she actually does. In fact, she sells it. We have a friend who has an on-farm store, actually. So, because we got the recipe from a farm that we got the recipe from Green Star Farm in Blacksburg, Virginia, that we used to work for, and it's a big batch. Like I think the recipe calls for 100 habanero peppers, and so it's a lot. Yeah, I mean, a lot of other things, like a lot of sweet stuff goes into the sauce. Yeah, but like she makes, to be able to sell it, she makes multiple batches of that. So yes, we need hundreds of habanero peppers.
Nice.
And it's kind of touch and go up here. So I'll get some of that. Sounds like we should do a little trial on that one, because that might be better than.
Yeah, and it's cool. It's kind of like the corn, where the 3 different colors have 3 different flavors. Like the habanero colors also have a flavor profile that's kind of tied to them. And the yellow one has this very citrusy bite to it. And the orange one is that classic habanero flavor that's very recognizable. And the peach one is this interesting, like tropical, hard to explain seasoning pepper flavor that's distinct and interesting. So having a bottle of each one side by side, you're like, oh wow, these are very different. Never get bored.
Yeah. Never a dull moment. Cool. Yeah, we'll have to try those. Are there any other varieties that are new for 2026 that you want to tell us about?
There's a few. There's Grenoble, the snap bean that's not bred by us, but I'm really excited to add that one next year. We released a lettuce that I'm calling Red Wing Blackbird lettuce that is a cross to Calura, an old classic romaine, with a ear of the devil, and ended up with some unique colors and some unique flavors. There's a lot of lettuce out there, but like it's really fun to have your own varieties, and that's one that I liked quite a bit. It's kind of a small romaine. I was thinking that like maybe I could create a Breedng that wasn't patented or PVP'd, that could be open source.
Yeah.
Because it's such a good variety that would be cool to have an alternative to. And it's similar but different. Things like that.
Yeah. Well, I think those smaller framed lettuces are really popular, because I think people have realized you can cram so many more of them into a bed than like the older, like really big framed lettuces, and potentially get as much or almost as much as a large framed lettuce. So
and when we worked market, it was always funny to have these giant heads of lettuce, and people would just like pick them up and set them back down with like an awkward look on their face. And you're like, oh, you don't want that. You don't want to take that much lettuce home, because you'll feel guilty if half of it goes bad.
Right. People don't have big enough families for a giant head of lettuce anymore.
Yeah, it's the same price as the little head. You can see if you can eat it all.
Yeah. Makes great compost if you don't.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, it can be.
The little miniature little gems are cool, but I like a kind of intermediate size romaine is kind of my favorite, like a Winter Density or those mediums, mini romaines. That's kind of sweet spot, I think.
Yeah, well, I mean, Winter Density has been popular for a very long time, so they think there's a reason.
Yeah, We usually add about 20 new varieties a year, kind of been our consistent amount. And this year's we're maybe a 20, 22 varieties. And it's going to be a mix of like varieties that we've bred, varieties that we've sourced, some cool, like weird things that I'll be interested to see how many people buy it, like some perennial vegetables that might grow in your orchard, things like that, and also some things that like are great varieties that other people bred that are harder to find. We like to keep stuff available as organic certified seed, may be coming and going out of availability. So we're going to carry Frank Morton Wild Garden Seeds. He had a variety called Golden Apple, like a nice like kind of like small bell pepper, the shape of an apple that's golden and produces like crazy. And he said it didn't sell well for him, but I like it so much, I'm going to try to see if I can convince people to grow it too. So like things like that, the lost sheep, I can go get them back on the market.
Yeah. Well, that's great, because obviously I feel like the big companies concentrate on like things that are sold a lot, and they concentrate on the mass market and don't really focus on that kind of stuff. So I'm glad you are.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Andrew, you've been really generous with your time. I just realized we've been talking for almost 2 hours now. So it might be a good time to wrap up. But I did want to give you a chance. Before we do, is there anything else I should ask you or that you'd like to say before we let you go?
We've been talking a while. This is good. I could go on forever about these things. But yeah, let's just want people to be excited about seeds and not have to worry about if they can save it and grow it themselves.
Yeah, we covered a lot of ground, and I hope that'll be encouraging. Maybe give people some ideas for different things they can plant this year, and maybe even start a breeding project. So, yeah, I think this is fun, and you're also the kind of person I could see having on again at some point. We could probably talk more. I'm sure we could. So, some other time.
Yeah, thanks for the meandering conversation. It was fun.
It was fun. I enjoy it. I also feel like if people haven't done much breeding, there's no way to know what goes into it. So I really appreciate you telling us about, what you guys do.
Yeah.
Oh, but before we let you go, where can people find you online or social media or wherever you want people to find you?
AdaptiveSeeds.com is our website where all the varieties live. And we're not super active on social media, but you could probably find us if you want to message us there. It might take us a while to get you, but emailing us, going to our website and emailing us would be the best way to get a hold of us. And we're excited to hear about how things grow for people. It always helps us keep going and motivates us to keep going. So.
Yeah, that must be fun to see pictures and just see your stuff growing in farms and gardens like in all over the place.
Yeah.
So. All right. Well, thanks a lot, Andrew. I really enjoyed it. I think our audience will too. So we'll let you go. But it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Growing for Market podcast. If you've been enjoying the show, please consider giving us a follow and a rating or a review. It really helps others find the podcast. For more tips and tricks from farmer to farmer, check out our magazine at growingformarket.com. Whether you're a commercial grower or just want to grow like one, subscribe to Growing for Market magazine for the nitty-gritty of growing, marketing, and the business of market farming. We publish 10 issues per year with articles written by experienced farmers on topics ranging from tools and techniques to farm business operations and marketing. If you've been listening to the Growing for Market podcast and haven't yet checked out Growing for Market magazine, we've made a change so you can try the magazine for free. We've added a free month to the beginning of all first-time subscriptions. Try out the digital or paper magazine for a month, and if it's not for you, cancel within 28 days and you'll never even get billed. All subscriptions get you a year of the magazine, plus 150 downloadable back issues from the last 15 years and over 1,700 archived articles. With digital subscriptions starting at just $39 a year, head on over to growingformarket.com and subscribe today to benefit from over 3 decades of writing by farmers, for farmers, in Growing for Market magazine.